Hello! Welcome! If you are new here, my name is Catherine, and I'm here to talk about books. Today is part 2 of my tier ranking video. I am tier ranking classic lines of literature, the first opening lines of classic books, and if I think they are hot or not, and just my musings, my feelings on these lines. If you are tuning into part 2 but you haven't watched part 1, I have linked it below, and you can go watch it, so you can watch over an hour of me talking about books, because that first video was getting long. I was going to do it all in one, and I went, girl, no one's sitting through that. So I made it into 2 parts. So yeah, hope you enjoyed. Let's pick up exactly where we left off. I will be wearing the same shirt, but it's a me from a different time, so you enjoy that. Next is On the Road by Jack Kerouac. Again, don't have this book with me, but I do have the first line. This is beat poetry, so Jack Kerouac literally wrote the whole book just on one continuous long scroll. So there were some sentences in here where I was like cue bongo music. I was like, okay, that was a sentence. But I do remember the line of this one being very short. I first met Dean not long after my wife and I split up. I find that one kind of interesting. First of all, if you know the book and you've read the book, Dean is a fascinating character because he's just all over the place, kind of bonkers. And it's kind of interesting because you're like, oh, he is meeting this guy who's then going to take him on this whole thing. You know Dean is important because he's coming up so early on. And after the narrator and his wife has split up. So he's probably going into a different part of his life. I'm not going to say it's the most interesting sentence on the planet. It's not like I'm like riveted. But I'm there. I'm intrigued. You know, it gives me something. Even though it doesn't really give me anything about Dean. I'm gonna give it words on a page, because I'm not like I hate it, because it still gives me a little bit of something, but I'm not like, it's not middle of the road, you know, it's just kind of like, meh, yeah, it's okay. It's there, but the rest of the book is pretty good. I do like On the Road. Next is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest by Ken Kesey. Great book. If you've never read. This was a book I read in college when I was procrastinating on other work. I read this in like a day, 2 days. I just sped through it. I actually prefer Sometimes a Great Notion by him, but this is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is his classic novel, so I thought we would do One Flew. They're out there. Black boys in white suits up before me to commit sex acts in the hall and get it mopped up before I can catch them. I love that. I decided to do the 2 sentences because they're out there is still a good line, but I think it needed the full picture. That sentence makes you go like, what the heck is that? Like, what does that mean? Black boys in white suits, sex acts in the hall, mopped up. Like, it's like super visceral and super kind of a little, like, you don't know why, but it seems a little gross or a little scary. So this is the chief who's speaking, who's our main character. He's in a mental ward. That's where this all is taking place. And when you remember that part of it, you're like, oh. So that means that first line, like, they're out there, and then this whole ensuing sentence about these men committing these acts before I can catch them, it has a very, like, paranoid edge to it. It has, like, he might be a bit paranoid schizophrenic, or he has some, like, paranoid tendencies of being like, they're out there and they're doing this thing before I can even catch them doing it. It is excellent in that it makes us see the world through this character's eyes and how he's going to view the rest of the ensuing events. Black boys being the orderlies who work at this hospital. But the fact he calls them that, like, they feel almost like otherworldly or sinister when it's just the guys who work at the hospital. I really like that line. Like, I really think that really sets you up. It sets the tone. That sentence is so complicated and it was kind of hard to read because it just, the structure is so strange, but it's because it's indicative of the voice of the character. I really like that one a lot. I really do. I think I'm going to put it in spicy. I like it. I don't think it's as iconic to be like a slay queen, but I think it's spicy. It's definitely spicy because it gets me intrigued. It sets up the whole tone of the whole book. So, good job, Casey. All that acid did something for you. Next is also a book I don't have with me, but this is a great book that I read in high school. Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. Excellent, excellent novel. And it has such a great opening. Ships at a distance have every man's wish on board. I do like those sentences that don't necessarily have exposition, but it's just like a statement, like a very profound statement that sets up the book. Ships at a distance have every man's wish on board, which then just sets up the rest of the book in that it's about this woman and her relationships with people. And it's about longing, like it's about people wanting things that they can't necessarily have, or just having like yearning for something different. And ships at a distance, meaning like these things that are carrying other things and that you can't get to. They're just these kind of ships on the horizon. Have every man's wish on board. Like that makes you sit with that sentence and like really chew it. Because even still, I can't fully vocalize why I love it so much or what it means, but it's just so well done. And like you're projecting, like you're like, oh, that has, you know, maybe I'm thinking I want freedom, or I want to travel, or it has riches on board that I want. Like you project outwards to something that you can't have. I could be off base, but that's the feeling I get from it, and it's just so good. Like I love that. I think it might be a Slay Queen, like cause and I'd forgotten about this line because I haven't read this book in so long, but now that I've brought it back to my mind, I'm like, I'm gonna think about it. I think it's Slay Queen, Serve Mother. I think that's a great line. Ships at a distance have every man's wish on board. Oof. We gotta talk about that book more. I gotta reread that one. Next is 100 Years of Solitude. 100 Years of Solitude. Truly a fantastic book. One of my faves. And I'm sorry, this line. Many years later, as he faced the firing squad, Colonel Aureliano Buendia was to remember the distant afternoon when his father took him to discover ice. Dunked on him. I'm sorry, that is a fantastic line. Why? This whole video I feel like I've been like, yeah, it's too much exposition, it's just exposition. But this is a perfect example of someone who's doing exposition but in such a vague way and like such a beautiful way that it's not necessarily about like setting a scene and making sure it's very clear. It's introducing you to a major character. It's introducing you to the Buendia lineage, and it's going forward in time because he's facing a firing squad, and all of a sudden you're like, whoa, why is there a firing squad? Like, what the heck happened? There's that. And the fact that, like, when he's facing the firing squad, why is he thinking of that moment? Why is he thinking about when his father went to show him ice? And why is that a big deal? Like, why in this world is going to discover ice a big deal? I don't know about you, but I read that sentence and I go, you have to tell me everything. Like, give me everything. I want to keep going. This is one of those books that when I started reading it, it's not a small book. I read this in like 3 days because I was just like, yeah, keep going. He just entices you with all these little sentences as you keep going, and this is a perfect indication of that. That is, to me, it's a long sentence, it's a little bit of exposition, but it is slay. It's a slay. I mean, this man didn't miss. Like, this author, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, he didn't miss. It's so good. It's so good. Just like think about that line and like think about the images that evokes. You're thinking of this man standing in front of a bunch of guns, and you can kind of like see him go back in time in his mind. Like he's kind of like disassociating, and he's like going into a memory of him being younger and like seeing ice with his father. The images are, it's just gorgeous, and it makes sense for the whole book. So good. Slay Queen, Serve Mother. That's what Marquez came to do, and he did. Next, I decided to do a Japanese classic, because I didn't have one on here. Snow Country by Yasunari Kawabata. This book was great. Great imagery, very quiet, but very moving. I don't remember how it starts. Like, I truly do not remember this first line. Snow Country. The first line. The train came out of the long tunnel into the snow country. Come on, Kawabata. To be fair, a lot of this book kind of reads very simplistically. Like, there's not a lot of flowery language. It's not super... It gets kind of dreamy and philosophical, but not in the sentence structure necessarily. More so the setting and the surroundings and the conversations of the characters can be a little bit, like, dreamy, but a lot of the, like, setting the scene feels very cut and dry. The train came out of the long tunnel into the snow country. I do like using it as the snow country. Like, that is nice. Instead of saying a specific destination or a specific place, just calling it a long The train came out of the long tunnel into the snow country. That I like. And coming out of the long tunnel, like, into this, maybe this new place. Just this new setting. And it's its own special place that he's not going to name by name. He's just going to call it the snow country. It does give it kind of an otherworldly feel, while still staying pretty realistic. I'm gonna give this one words on a page. I don't think it's not terrible, but it's also, I think, just kind of words on a page. It's just, he's had to start the book, and that's where he started, and yeah, it's okay. Next is Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe, which I have. Here it is. I liked this book a lot. I think this is a great, this is a video I made a long time ago, but if you're new to classics, I'd say this is a great one to go to, because it's a more modern classic. It is Nigerian. It's a good book. Very good book. But again, I don't remember how this starts. So, Okonkwo was well known throughout the 9 villages and even beyond. Now, it does make the first word of the book the main character, which I always think is pretty significant. You should always look at the first sentence and the last sentence if you're doing any kind of, like, critique or if you're examining the book further. And to the fact that Okonkwo is like the central figure and like the central cause for conflict throughout this book, and that he's the first in it, is significant. I can't say that that does too much for me. We just established he was important. Like, he was famous, he was important, which is the case. That is how he starts off, because this is a tale of someone who starts at such a high and falls to such a low. It also establishes that the 9 villages are somehow connected, or is kind of the worldview of the people who are living in these villages, because then it's 9 villages and beyond. So these 9 villages somehow play a very important role in relation to each other. So it gives setting, it gives exposition, it shows us Okonkwo, but like, this is also, this is words on a page for me. I think it does what it has to do. It starts the book, introduces you to Okonkwo, but I'm not gripped. I'm kind of like, yeah, cool. So that's that one. Next we have Wide Sargasso Sea by Jean Rice. Jean Reese? I always say this wrong. I think it's Reese. I'm gonna say Reese. Great book. I consider this a modern classic. It was written in the 60s, but I'm putting it in classic status because this is my channel. Here it is. First line. They say when trouble comes, close ranks, and so the white people did. But we were not in their ranks. I love that line. I did the two because I think just that second line really, like, captures it. Strictly the first line being, they say when trouble comes, close ranks, and so the white people did, is already so strong, but then also following it with, but we were not in their ranks. If you know nothing about this book, if you're going in completely blind, you're going, okay, so when trouble comes, close ranks, meaning, like, if something's brewing, like, everybody kind of keep hold. Stay with each other, stick with each other, and close your doors and buck up. And so the white people did that, but we were not in their ranks. So does that mean that these people are not white? Are they white and they're being excluded from the white people? Like, it already brings in such racial dynamics and such racial tensions so effectively and so quickly in those two sentences. I'm sorry, it's brilliant. They say when trouble comes, close ranks, like it's almost like a known thing or like a saying that people have. So when that is so the white people did. Like, what trouble has come, and so the white people are going, whoa, we gotta stick with us. We're only sticking with these people, these white people, people who look like us, and you're on the outside. And meaning we were not in their ranks as the narrator and whoever she's with. We were not with them. It becomes already, which is throughout this book, when they are on the islands, is very clear. It's us versus them. Or really, them versus us, because do we deserve it? I don't know. I don't want to give too much away in this book because there is such a spoiler. If you haven't read this book, please read it. But that gives such a good... it opens the book so well. It's so good. I wouldn't say it's like as quotey or quippy or memorable. I don't know if I'll put it in Slay Queen, but it's spicy. Like, this is definitely spicy because it gives some exposition without giving really much at all. It just sets up that there's racial tension and there's us versus them. It did it brilliantly. It did it so succinctly that she gets my praise. I love this book. Next, moving right along. We have The Woman in White, which I do not have with me. I should have with me. I've talked about it a bunch on this channel already because I want more people to read this book. We gotta talk about it more. And I gotta say, this opening line is fire. This is the story of what a woman's patience can endure and what a man's resolution can achieve. And isn't that just every 19th century novel? Every 19th century novel is testing the patience of a woman, let me tell you. And that fact that it just opens with that, like he's basically saying like, this is what it's gonna be about. This is it. So like what this woman's gonna go through, how far her patience is gonna be tested, and what men can do when they put their mind to it. To maybe ameliorate that or to make it worse. I think that's a very good line. I really do think that's a good line. It is very 19th century in that it is like, here's what the story is about. But done in a way that it just rolls off the tongue well. Again, not as quippy and not as memorable, I would say, but still evocative and still well said. Should also be noted that woman is capitalized and man is capitalized, which is significant because he's bringing it, I think, to a universal platform there. I think it's spicy. I think this is spicy, and it's not brought up that much because I don't think this book is discussed enough at all. Because it's just sensationalist trash. But I think obviously it's above that. It's quite good. So I'd say it's spicy. It's not one where I'm like, oh, but it's one where I'm like, yeah, okay. And I want to keep reading because I'm like, you're going to tell me, you're going to back up that thesis basically. And he does. Wilkie, let's go. Right, next is Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad, which is one of my least favorite books of all time, which is why I wanted to include it. I didn't want this list to just be classics that I loved. I read Heart of Darkness in high school and I hated it, but I do have a copy because at some point I think I will want to reread it and try to give it another chance. Because I'm benevolent like that. First line. The Nelly, a cruising yawl, swung to her anchor without a flutter of the sails and was at rest. Look, that gives me that a boat is at rest. That is what that gives me. We're on a boat called the Nelly because it's always the something, and it's usually a woman's name. So we know we're on a boat, and it says it's a cruising yawl, which, do I necessarily know what a yawl is? No, but I'm using context clues. It's some kind of boat. And swung her anchor without a flutter of the sails and was at rest. A ship is docking. A ship is anchoring. Cool. I'm really trying not to put my own bias on this, but if I am trying to strip away all that I know about this book and what I don't like about this book, if I was coming to this completely fresh with no expectations, I can't say that that is like super intriguing. It's a ship. It's a ship anchoring. It's got to be words on a page. To me, it's words on a page because I don't think that really gets me wanting to keep reading. I think it's kind of just like, yeah, it's there. It's there. Next is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. Fantastic book. Great horror novel. One of the first horror novels of all time. I have my nice hardcover of it here that I read from. It has really cool illustrations in. Now this book is interesting in that it kind of has a prologue, but I didn't want to, oh, it has a preface, excuse me. It's got a preface, but I really feel like when I was like looking up first lines of these books and like seeing what is kind of agreed upon as the first line, it really took you to chapter 1. There's also some supplementary letters at the beginning that kind of serve as an introduction. However, I didn't really think that that is where I wanted to start, so I am just starting with chapter 1, first sentence. I am by birth a Genovese, and my family is one of the most distinguished of that republic. Nah, I'm saying Genovese as in like Kitty Genovese. If it's Genovese, poo on me then, but I'm saying Genovese. Yeah, like it's fine. Again, it's exposition. It's basically saying like, I have to explain a bit of my lineage. It's important, and then we will move on to the rest. It's not doing much for me. This is also words on a page, I feel like, because it's not getting me to like really be like, ooh, what's next? It's basically just going, yep, we're in a story. We're moving. It's not my favorite, but the rest of the book, fabulous. Next is a book I spoke in my last video. If you haven't watched it, go watch it. Not that I haven't read. I've never read this book, but I do consider this a modern classic. I think at this point we can all kind of agree it's classic. It's The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. Handmaid's Tale. We slept in what had once been the gymnasium. You might think, that's exposition. Yeah, it is. But what I think is intriguing about this sentence and why it's a good sentence is in what had once been the gymnasium. We know we're in some kind of post-apocalyptic, maybe dystopian world where things were one thing and now they're serving as another place. And that, or maybe our way of life that we would recognize more is now gone and it's being served. These structures, these buildings, these things are being used to other purposes. Because sleeping in a gymnasium to me also evokes like a relief shelter. Like when there's been, like in Hurricane Katrina, there was tons of gyms got turned into people being able to sleep there. So it gives that. It gives like it's a shelter. It gives that it's like a relief space. So you're kind of like, why? Like this used to be the gymnasium. Why are you sleeping there? What's happened? Is it post-apocalyptic? Is it dystopic? Like what is this? I just think it's intriguing. It's I wouldn't say it's like dazzling. It's not a dazzling first line, but it's just intriguing. I think I would put this in yeah, I'll keep reading. Because again, it's a very simple sentence, but you just go, huh, why? Why was it, it's the gym, but why are you sleeping there? And I haven't read this book, so I do read that and I go, yeah, I want to know. Why are they sleeping in the gym? Why do they sleep there? Intriguing first line. Next we have The Secret History by Donna Tartt. Woohoo! I read this in 2021. This I brought with me on a trip to Greece, so this was a beach read for me. She's kind of falling apart. This one I did pick the prologue line, because I think the prologue line is pretty fire. The snow in the mountains was melting, and Bunny had been dead for several weeks before we came to understand the gravity of our situation. Oof! That is good. That is good. I think because it sets you up, like, it sets the exposition. You know right away, it's no spoiler. Bunny's dead. Whoever Bunny is, if you don't know the book, if you haven't read it, someone named Bunny is dead. He has been for weeks at the point of when this is coming up, before we came to understand the gravity of our situation. Like what does our mean in the context of Bunny being dead? Like what does that, did you kill him? Did you see him die? Is this like a point, like a very central point in the timeline that then puts you in relation to the rest of the events of the book? Like, what does that mean? The snow in the mountains was melting. And just, like, that's, like, that nature scene is evocative, too, of, like, the snow melting and they're coming to an understanding. Like, almost like spring is coming and they're all of a sudden, like, realizing what doo-doo they're in. I think this is, it's really well done. I think it's somewhere between yeah, I'll keep reading and spicy, I like it, but I think it might be spicy. It's a little spicy. Also because the name Bunny is so good, it just like, it has little nuggets in that sentence that are just so like, good. Sets you up, sets up a tone. The sentence is really interesting. Donna, you card. You absolute tart. Got two more. Two more left. We got Sons and Lovers by D.H. Lawrence. I love this book, but it's one of those ones that I don't remember how it starts. I just remember the rest of the book. Like, I loved this book so much, and also one that I don't think is talked about a lot, so I wanted to just read the first line and just see. Sons and Lovers, my weird, like, 70s copy of it. With, like, didn't even try to make it late 19th, early 20th century. The Bottoms succeeded to Hell Row. And then if you keep going, Hell Row was a block of thatched, bulging cottages that stood by the brookside on Green Hill Lane. DH, come on, man. Give me something. This book has such emotional depth and like goes on such a journey that the fact it starts with just describing the place is a little boring to me. It's important. I think location in his books are important. It's about being in the country. His books are always about the countryside, how they're evolving in more modern times, how people's desires and people who are ahead of their time don't fit well in these provincial places. So location is important in D.H. Lawrence for sure, but come on, man. Like, it gives me, it just sets up the scene, but then I don't care. I don't care. I guess you're killing me, Smalls. I'm sorry. I didn't think I'd put that many in this category, but it just gives me, it's not doing much. It's just setting the scene. This is just like pure set dressing, Eugene O'Neill theater stage description directions setting the scene. And I'm... Fly is back. Die. Kill you with my D.H. Lawrence book. And the last. The last is Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov. I saved... Not to give it away already, but I saved one of the best for last. My copy of Lolita, which I spoke about in my Shop My Stash video. Lolita, light of my life, fire of my loins, my sin, my soul. And if you keep going, Lolita, the tip of the tongue taking a trip of 3 steps down the palate to tap at 3 on the teeth. Lolita. Dang, that's good. That is so good. Again, when you know the context, he's talking about a 10-year-old girl, yeah, that's not good. But it then makes that line just like, talk about evocative. Like this one is evocative, all capitals. Lolita, light of my life, fire of my loins. Like what a fire of my loins? Like, oh my god. Like, this guy isn't just like, oh, you know, she's cute. No, this is like, you know, he's on another level here. Like, he's really, I mean, probably a little off his rocker, especially when you know, again, it's about a child. My sin, my soul. Like, this isn't just a love that's a crush. She is, like, fully in it, and you know right away that that's the case. Also, and the wordplay in this. Just the first sentence, because the repetition of the L sound, and the second sentence with the repetition of the S, and then the T's in that third line. Lolita, the tip of the tongue taking a trip of 3 steps down the palate to tap at 3 on the teeth. Like, oh my god, like, dude, the alliteration work, it evokes something. Like, I can't even put my finger on it what it does, but the separate alliterations in all of those sentences is just so amazing. I just want to keep reading it. Like, the writing is so good. She was low, plain low in the morning, standing 4 feet 10 in one sock. And you're like, oh. She was Lola in slacks. She was Dolly at school. She was Dolores on the dotted line, but in my arms she was always Lolita. He slayed. He came to slay, and he slayed. I'm sorry, that first line, you can say what you want about this book, but that just shows you how strong and how evocative and how masterful this writing is just from that first line. He just, look at him, he knew what he did. He's serving major see you next Tuesday, that's what I'm gonna say. Lolita. How can you not want to keep reading after that? You're like, oh shoot, like what is this? Then when he says like she stood 4 foot 10, you go, what? It's like a record scratch. Like, whoa, what? she was Dolly at school? Like, how old are you talking about here? Like, it just, you already are going down the path of madness with this guy. And he's unreliable. So I'm like, you're reading this and you're going, do we trust this guy? I don't know if we trust this guy, because you probably shouldn't. Lolita. It's a slay. Slay queen, serve mother. Like, he served. Alright, well that is our list. I'm not surprised I put yeah, I'll keep reading, because I feel like often classic novels, especially 19th century ones, are kind of like, let's just begin the book. But I'm surprised how many I put in Words on the Page and You're Killing Me smalls. Like ones that I was just like, yeah, these didn't really do much for me at all, except start the book. But then of course the ones I have in the iconic Slay Queen one, like, so good. Just so good. So, yeah, this is my list. You could totally disagree with me on all of these. These are my opinion. You could have ones that you really love. Would you rearrange any of these? Do you disagree? Agree with me? Are there first lines of books that I didn't include on this list that you think are iconic and are a major slay? Tell me. Want to know. Yeah, I gotta get started on cleaning our apartment. The vacuum is going. We gotta get moving. So, thank you so much for joining me on this. If you had fun, like, comment, subscribe, share the video, do whatever you want, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye!